Today is June 13. We have our RDA meeting. I want to welcome everybody to the meeting. Our meetings are public, and you're welcome to join us in person or through Zoom, or by watching the City Council agendas page, Facebook, YouTube, and SLC TV. We hope you will continue to join us in whichever manner you feel most comfortable. We begin with comments to the board. I would like to remind that written comments can be submitted to the RDA offices via mail, P.O. Box 145476, SLC, Utah 84114, or by emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone line, 801-535-7654. Thank you for joining us tonight, or this afternoon. Before we start, I want to remind everybody about the rules of decorum, which are in place to ensure our meetings move along well and to help everybody feel comfortable sharing their comments. A copy of the full rules of decorum are available at the door, and our staff will post the link in the Zoom chat. If you would like to comment on the public hearing today, we are accepting comments in person and online on Zoom. Scott Corpany from our staff will moderate our Zoom and will message you with any questions about your registration. Staff is handling many tasks, so please limit messages to technical issues and minimal information updates. If you need to speak with our staff, please select Scott Corpany from the list of participants. If you need to, you can also raise your hand in Zoom to indicate that you need someone to contact you. Taylor Hill and our staff will be calling those who wish to comment based on the order we receive the names. If you are on Zoom, please unmute your mic when Taylor calls your name. We will now open our general comment period. Taylor, please start with our first comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It looks like there is no one registered to speak to this item.
Is there anybody here that wants to address the RDA board? Okay, I see none. Thank you. Moving on now to item C1, which is the approval of the minutes. I need a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the meeting minutes of April 11th, 2023.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Dugan and a second by Board Member Valdemoras. I'm going to call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously, with Councilmember Wharton also adding his aye vote. Now we're moving to item B2, informational update, accessory dwelling unit assistance program. We will have at the table Danny Waltz, the RDA director, Austin Taylor, project manager, Lauren Parisi, senior project manager, to give us a little update on this.
Okay, thanks to all of you for having us back again. If you'll remember, in October of last year, we came to talk about this ADU assistance program. So since then, I'll go into detail in the slides, but essentially since then, we have written the RFQ. It's gone through multiple revisions. It's now in the hands of the procurement department. And we're back here today to ask what you want to see in this program. If you have new ideas, because I know you've gone through quite a process of in the zoning changes for ADUs, talking about ADUs, researching ADUs, so I'm sure you have a lot of new ideas that you'd like to see in this program. So we'll go through the slides quickly and we can talk about that. Let's go to the next slide. We can just skip to the next one. Essentially, we talked about this last time. Financing is the biggest issue that homeowners are seeing as they're building ADUs, and that's even more the case now that the zoning changes have passed. Let's go to the next slide. And as we've talked about before, ADUs are encouraged in the housing plan as a way to add units. So It's encouraged that we support their construction. Let's go next. As well, in the West Side master plans, specifically, it calls out accessory dwelling units as something that should be added to the West Side. Let's go to the next slide. As we talked about last time, our 9-lane project area is the area that we're targeting for this ADU program to launch it. And this is for a number of reasons, but the biggest is because we just don't see the ADU construction here that we've seen in other areas of the city. If you look at the zoning map on the right, you'll see that the 9-lane project area, which encompasses parts of Poplar Grove and Glendale, have a lot of single-family zoning, as you can see in Liberty Wells area, East Liberty area, Sugar House area. But the difference here is that whereas ADUs are being built generally east of State Street, they are not being built as much in Poplar Grove, Glendale, 9-lane project area. Let's go next. Just some stats about our 9-lane project area. And we'll go to the next slide. That it was in a redlined area historically. We'll go next. So since we last talked in October, you all have passed a whole set of ADU zoning code changes that greatly permitted the construction of ADUs. So the issues that we heard about before are essentially gone since that ADU zoning change. And so the still construction costs and financing options are the lingering issues, and we hope that this ADU assistance program will tackle those things. Let's go to the next slide. And as a refresher, staff has done quite a bit of exploration work, researching what we want to see in this program. We've interviewed builders and architects, homeowners that have built ADUs. We've looked at different programs around the country. We've been to Poplar Grove and Glendale community council meetings to talk to them about this program and get their ideas. So we've been gathering a lot of ideas in preparation for releasing this RFQ. Let's go to the next slide. And the goals, these are listed directly in the RFQ. And these goals we came up with after discussing this with you all. The goals of this program are to increase the supply of naturally affordable rental housing, to incrementally increase density in low-density neighborhoods, to provide low to moderate income homeowners in formerly redlined areas a wealth-building opportunity, and to increase neighborhood stability and investment. Let's go to the next slide. These program preferences are also listed in our RFQ at this time. So these are things we want to see in the program. A component of financing that could be loans or grants. We want to see landlord training and tenant screening. We want to see the ability to finance and construct attached and detached ADUs, cost-cutting strategies that could be pre-approved plans. It could be modular construction where maybe we're bulk purchasing ADUs at a discount for installation. We'd like to see compliance monitoring. If the ADUs are deed restricted or have to be affordable, we want to make sure that the rents are actually being charged correctly, affordably. And then some component of affordability, and this is both a legal requirement and something that we'd like to see. Either the homeowner themselves is a low to moderate income homeowner that we're helping, or maybe the tenant is a low income renter that we're helping. Let's go next. These are suggestions that the Redevelopment Advisory Committee told us as we pitched the program idea to them. They said that we should have a small rental affordability period with every ADU that we finance. They thought maybe we could have utility connection subsidy, whether that's a grant or a loan. They asked us to go and meet with homeowners in the 9-line area, which we did. And they also pushed for owner occupancy requirement, which is in the code now and still is. And then they pitched the idea of bulk purchasing modular ADUs for cost savings. Go to the next slide. Back in October, this is the feedback that you gave us. So you told us you would support a low to zero interest loan on the project. You would support allowing homeowners to charge market rate rents so that they could build wealth, supporting pre-approved plans to cut costs and speed up building permit timelines, possible deed restriction to ensure rental affordability. This is particularly important in our opportunity areas, which are higher income neighborhoods. And then you express support for high energy efficiency standard, which is RDA policy already, and will ensure that's enforced. Go to the next slide. As a refresher, here's the money that we're looking at for this program. Back in fiscal year 2022, the board set aside $394,000 for the RDA to fund this program. In April of this year, as the council were talking about the ADU code changes, you moved to set aside $1 million for this program. And then in the RDA's 2024 budget, we're proposing to set aside another $400,000. So to sum it all up, we're looking at about $1.8 million that could be dedicated to this program. Let's go to the next slide. Here's the process that we're looking at, the next steps that we're taking right now. So as I said, we have an RFQ that's drafted, ready for editing after you guys give us some feedback. And we would release this RFQ as soon as we get the go-ahead, essentially. After it's out, we'll take a short list of applicants for the RFQ, and this ideally will have maybe some architects, maybe some construction contractors. It could have finance partners, so it could have lenders, it could have loan administrators who help us service these loans and distribute them to homeowners. Other groups that might apply could be groups to walk homeowners through the process of permitting, because that's also a challenging process. So again, we'll release that RFQ, we'll get applications from those groups, we'll select who we think are the most qualified from those applicants to go on to an RFP round, which in that RFP round, they'll come up with a program proposal. And then at that point, we'll select our program partners, come up with the program idea, come back to you, the board, for approval of that program. And ideally that's in winter of this year. Then we could launch it early next year. So that's what we're looking at for the timeline. Do you have any questions about the RFQ, RFP process? It's a little complicated, I know.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So typically, I guess I'm confused because we don't have like a development site. It's potentially anyone's backyard. So what is this team that is being selected doing? If they want to, if a homeowner in the 9-line area or somewhere else in the city, whatever the boundaries end up being, wants to take advantage of the program, they have to use the team that we've selected in order to design and build and finance their ADU?
Possibly. So it's very open-ended right now. We're essentially, ideally, looking to create a one-stop shop where people could come to and get financing, architectural help, construction help, maybe permitting assistance. And so, yes, if we do get a good pool of qualified applicants, that team might be, a fully fleshed one-stop shop where they use a certain architect, a certain construction team. But we might not get that in our applications. We might get maybe just a bank that helps us with lending, so we have access to more money to lend out. So it's all pretty open-ended right now. Do you guys have any?
Yeah, I think essentially we're looking for a partner to help us flesh out those details. And in our RFQ, we have those preferences that Austin talked about of things that we'd like this program to explore. And so it could be, like Austin just mentioned, like just the financing piece, but we're looking for it to be more robust. I think we just need this partner to help us kind of fine tune the details of if it'll be a one-stop shop, if it'll just be financing, like what's most appropriate to really support the community and their needs.
I guess my concern is that robust in this case is starting to feel like inflexible for the homeowner. in terms of what if I don't like that one plan or this one builder? It seems, the level of detail feels a little bit, I just am wrapping my head around the fact that we're selecting all of the pieces for the people and they get to come choose this team, or they don't get to benefit from the financing tools.
And I think we're not certain yet if we're selecting all of the pieces. Like, we'd like the submissions to explore like the possibility of using standardized plans. But if that's not, I definitely could see someone wanting to make it more of their own. So I think it's just something that we want the submission to explore. But once we like fine tune the terms of the program, it might not necessarily include that. So there could be more flexibility for the homeowner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around it, but
This is good input.
I mean, in my learning from other cities on these programs, a standardization on these programs is beneficial because it saves cost in architectural designs, and it could save a lot of added cost to which at the end is a barrier to come up with your own ADU. I'm sure, I mean, if it is a concern, but that, if a homeowner has a different design or a different, style or whatever, I'm sure that maybe they can select some of this and they can change it. But in our conversations previously on this, we were talking about the standardization and a way of saving cost and trying to come up with, if you wish, a flavor list and said, okay, I like this one, and it's already designed, it's already ready to go. There is no architectural designs, there is no all of these added costs that they're already paid once, if you wish. But Councilmember Baldemoros, you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Like, do we have any examples of other cities that they have this one-stop shop that it works for them and that we can plagiarize
Yeah.
so that we don't, every time we do these things, my worry is about the length of the deployment of the program. Like, I get what you guys are saying, but I don't want this program to take another 2 years, because we have a plan. Like, we had a commitment with the council members that supported this idea to make sure that we invest and we help financially and see if we can get a lot of them done, with the caveat that in 2 or 3 years we are revising this to change some of the ordinance, because if nobody's doing this, then maybe one of the causes is that owner occupancy requirement that we left here. So if this takes another 2 years to deploy, then we're behind on the commitment that I had made with the ones that were not, excited about the ordinance. We're behind, and then what do we do? So what I'm trying to say is, if there's something else going on out there, like that has been working for the city, then maybe that's our plan, like that's our template.
Yeah.
And then plug it in to whoever, with an RFQ, and then if that, if whoever comes up with, if Just a Bank says, no, nobody else shows up and Just a Bank says, we're just gonna do the money, then forget it, let's just do the template from some other city and adapt it to us so we can get this going, and let's not wait any longer. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the discussion, and I appreciate the flow, and I also kind of agreeing with Councilman or Board Member Manos, the concern on. I see the one-stop shopping being kind of restrictive in nature, and maybe we can flesh that out in the RFQ process. I can see some areas it's great to have one-stop shopping as far as utilities and financing, some other things, but some of the personal side of the house or decision-making might need to have a little bit more expansive ability for the applicant who wants to build an ADU in their yard. So I think that RFQ process needs to be kind of, and I think you're gathering that already, so expand it a little bit as far as how we think. So, but I appreciate I like the flow and I like the vision of it all. Just a couple things on that. So thank you.
I had a quick question, and potentially it was said there is $1.8 million. Everything goes, to plan today, but to land on this, and assuming that an ADU costs $100,000, that's 18, ADUs. Are we? Will this process allow for partial, financing? So let's say, a homeowner, potentially has equity enough to come up with a loan for, half of that, and they have an issue coming up with the rest. Is that something that it could be allowed? And my second part of the question relates to equity and some of the barriers that some of the, members of the community might face related to, for example, language, right? And understanding the community of the West Side and the 9 Line, and maybe not understanding the lingo or the process, and how all of these barriers between what a city is and the community itself. So I'm hoping that, while we're selecting this people to help us with putting this program together, that we understand that there is a lot of barriers there beyond the money. The money is a big one. I mean, there seems to be a commitment by this board and the administration to make sure that there is money to help this, incentivize this, but there are other barriers out there.
Yeah, I can address that quickly if you want. So probably the key partner that we hope will apply to this is a lending partner. We know, $1.8 million is a really good amount of money, but it doesn't go too far in construction. We're seeing ADUs costing between $100,000 and $250,000. So like you said, if we're lending construction loans ourselves as an RDA, maybe like 80% loan to cost or something, it's not going to go very far. So we do want banks, other lending partners to apply to help us. And then as you're talking about language barriers, we do have in the RFQ that we'll be translating things to Spanish, and we're looking for a partner that understands communities there. If I could address your points, Councilmember Valdemoros. So Keys to Equity in Oakland is one of the programs that we really like, and essentially it's a model where they have a one-stop shop, they have a project manager that you, the homeowner, is assigned with, and they hold your hand through the entire process of finding funding to build your ADU, finding the architect to design it, getting the building permits from the city, finding the contractor, and then even property management afterwards. It's the best program that we've seen. It's the most holistic. I think we'd be thrilled if we could launch something like that. It's all going to depend on what kind of partners are interested in working with us.
Mr. Chair, I guess my initial feedback would be that whatever ends up happening, if there is this option for a one-stop shop, that may be applicable to a lot of homeowners, but there's a lot of cases where a standard plan won't work, like an attic conversion or a basement conversion or even an addition. Any kind of attached ADU isn't really going to work for any kind of standardized plan that I could think of. So to the extent that we're not only looking at like alley accessed 25 feet by 100 feet deep lots with a lot of space in the backyard, we're going to need to have some flexibility in that. So I think my hope is that we have a lot of resources, but that the homeowner can choose whichever resources are more applicable to them. And I think that has to go for the financing tools as well. So in some cases, there may be a lot of equity in the home and they can draw against that, and then they only need a little bit of a gap to finance the rest. In some cases, they may have no equity. Maybe they just bought the house. And I'm wondering if there's like a sliding scale of, and everything from, to me, the biggest thing that we could do would be to like actually purchase and build the ADU for them, and that would be like a land swap type of situation where the land would then go into the community land trust, and that property is now improved because we put an ADU on it for the homeowner, and they get to benefit from two improvements, the original house and the ADU, but then forever that piece of property stays in the community land trust. But that would be like they have zero financing in that case because they're giving up a really big piece of value in terms of that land value. And then all the way down to like, I just need $20,000 more because I didn't know my sewer utility connection was going to be this complicated and I have lead pipes I have to remediate or something like that. So I think what to me would be the most effective is if the financing tool, I think the financing tool is the most important piece, and that can be scalable to fit as many different situations as possible. From I have $0, but I do have this property that was my grandparents' house, and I have a lot of money, I just need a little extra help, and everything in between. And then the standardized plans will probably be helpful for a lot of people, even people that don't. Then the other question becomes, well, what if I want to use the standardized plan that's pre-approved because I know it's faster, but I'm gonna finance it all by myself and I don't want it to be deed restricted affordable. Do we allow that or not? I would think so if it's already there and ready, but I think those are the questions, like what degree of support kicks into where we're requiring affordability as a return, because I don't think it can be everything, right? Like a $15,000 loan that's repayable in 5 years probably wouldn't, that would be too big of an ask for that kind of a degree. So that may be like the most impossible problem to solve, but I think it gets to what I see is like, this is such a tailor-made situation to everyone's personal finances and their lot configuration that there's only so much standardization that would be applicable.
I think if I may, Director Mano, I think you just pointed out a lot of the reasons why we want to put out this RFQ, to have someone come in and help us, one, get information and ideas of how to address that, and then two, those issues will come back before you as a board as far as developing this program. I mean, we have to look at, we as an agency are doing this primarily as a pilot in the 9 line because that's a requirement of our interlocal with the county. So that's what kind of started us down this path. Obviously, as part of the city efforts and what you approved as a council, and now with additional funding, we're looking at how to potentially take that citywide. But I think as we do that, we're looking at what's appropriate for what we need in the 9 line area. How does that change when we start looking at a citywide program? What is that level of assistance that we potentially is what our role should be to help make this happen? And then to your last point, at what level of assistance do we put on different levels of conditions and requirements? And I think that's what we're hoping to bring back to you, of kind of like this matrix of these are our options. If we invest this much and this way, then this is what we're going to get in return. There could be some where we're just doing a little assistance to help with increased permitting costs, and there may be others where we're looking at funding a lot more, but then in exchange we're asking for a lot more, whether that's the affordability or whatever else. So that's what we're hoping to get out there and kind of understand what this program can be, look at examples and best practices, and then come back to you as a board and say, this is what we think we recommend our role as an agency or a city should be to help incentivize these, and this is what we expect in return. So,
If I may, I think we've got like a couple more slides and one question to ask you all. So is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's skip on to the next slide.
You open up for questions.
It's
your
that
fault.
yeah, you walked us into this.
That was important. So there's one more. We talked about the process and the components of the program. There's one more important question we want to ask you, and that's, should we pilot this first in the 9 line project area and then expand to other areas if there's not enough demand there, or there's demand for more, or should we open it up citywide? And when we ask that question, there's something to think about also, is that if we're using RDA money, we can only spend money on housing that's affordable outside of RDA project areas. So we can't fund market rate ADUs outside of project areas unless we're using other city funds, like general fund money that does not have those restrictions. So we'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
If I can jump in, because maybe I'll answer. I'll just add that I think what you are proposing right now as a board and city council with the funding of this additional $1 million, I think that's coming from Funding Our Future or the North Temple, so that would not carry the strict requirements, so that does give you an option. But I think that fills in what Austin's getting at, is that policy discussion of just 9 line to start, or do you want us to go out citywide to start, and how we do that. So, all right.
Board Member Petro.
How long are we considering the pilot program? Is it a full year of piloting, 6 months?
A year. I think we have it written in the RFQ right now.
So restricting it geographically for a year and then extrapolating from that year what the next step is.
And I mean, obviously the nature of a pilot, I think we really just want to learn from that and understand, is this working? What do we need to tweak before we take it citywide?
Member Valdemoros.
But I think Dugan had something before me. Sorry.
We can go ahead. I have my questions on the backstops.
No, well, obviously, I want citywide. You know, I don't want any delay because, again, I'm serious about the commitment that I made to all of you guys. That, so I would like citywide just to get it going. You know, learn as we go. But if the other members are like, no, let's just do it low income just in the affordable in the line, then that's fine. But it delays our 2-3 year commitment to look at it and if it worked or not for the owner occupancy requirement that we have in there. So citywide for me. One thing that and is related to the process, I think, and I hope that building permits is listening to us right now as we speak, and you guys have regular meetings with them, because the last thing I want to hear is that, well, we couldn't make it because building permits wasn't ready and wasn't really understanding what this program was, so we had all of these things to work through and the kinks and the, I hope that we all understand as a city, every city department that needs to be involved with this is going for it with us and making those reasonable adjustments, that are not not the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law in all of your ordinances and things that we have to do, because we bumped into these issues a lot with different construction projects and stuff like that were so strict that then we can't move things forward. And this is something that it's a goal of the city to provide affordable housing or additional housing units in this way through ADUs. So if you haven't, please reach out to them and get that conversation going. Hey, from your end, how are you gonna get this going as fast as possible? From our end, this is what we need to do, and from engineering's perspective, so that we prevent all of the roadblocks that we might foresee in the future. Thanks.
Thanks. We have organized this citywide ADU task force, and building department is on that. They know that this program is coming.
You're awesome. Thanks.
Member Dugan.
Yeah, I'll just, when I look at the 9-line product as the pilot, I go, yeah, that's probably a good place to start. But then I look at it and go, we've only had 100 ADUs, I think, across the city in 4 years. And so by limiting to a small area could also restrict our learning curve, what we find out from the pilot program. So I think maybe going citywide, all the RFQ still says, it's going to look like this citywide. I think it's probably give us a better picture of what we need to adjust if we don't after the pilot program. So I lean more towards the citywide because we've only had 104 years, and in this Public Grove area, we're not going to have another 100 really pop up just automatically, just because we give them a little extra funding, because it's still expensive proposal that they need to come up with. So that's one thing. That now I want to shift my question to my next question, going back to the board suggestions, and it took me a second. I had to go read through it again. So on the board suggestions, and even reading through it last night, is like we're supporting to allowing low to moderate income homeowners to participate at market rate rent, but then the 2 bullets down it says support and help both the low to moderate income homeowners and low income renters through the program with possible deed restrictions. And to me, those seem to conflict. And I guess the RFQ can kind of maybe answer that question. One is that we're allowing them to go market rate. The other one is saying, hey, we're going to deed restrict it. Is there different finances for those 2 different units? And how would that work?
Well, I think one thing we discussed too is thinking about if there's different needs in different areas of the city. And so it would be a great way to get more affordability on the east side if there were those deed restrictions, but maybe we want to keep it market rate in other areas to build wealth. And I think maybe those are a little contradicting, but maybe contemplating what's appropriate in different areas of the city, I think is maybe what we were getting at there.
Okay. I was just, to me, it was, and I understand that. So I just wanted to kind of, from my view, is like, oh, those are contradictory.
I would just add to that. I think Lauren touched on one, what that could look like across the city in different areas, and then two, to the point of what that could look like at our participation level. So again, if we're looking at wealth building or just increasing density, we may participate at a different level than if we're contributing something that we then in turn are looking for deed restriction or affordable units. And so that could be part of that matrix and how we develop the program of what we're really contributing and what we're getting out of it. So,
No, thank you. So I wanted to as the council member represents this part of town, and the RDA having done quite a bit of outreach to the community about this being the 9-line, the pilot program, I think it will be perceived as disingenuous if all of a sudden we say, oh, never mind, the pilot program will be citywide. I just want to caution that it might not look very good since we already reached out to the community quite a bit about this. So I believe that it should be a citywide program. I'm hoping that we get there. I hope that we learn a lot from this first pilot program on the 9-line, but I want to make sure that we are not setting the expectations differently, that wrong and the wrong way. So to me, it will be very important that we stay with the program as it was recommended and it was told the community it was going to go, and then we extrapolate and learn from this, and then we move on to probably a citywide program. Just as a caution from what I can perceive, if we all of a sudden change it.
Chair,
go ahead.
The only issue I see with that is that, like I said again, for the ADU change, ordinance change, we made commitments, and if we're just going to look at the 9-line to see if it worked or not, I'm not sure if that's good enough to look, to review what we need to review in the next 2-3 years. And also what I see is that I think we have decided that the RDA will do a lot of our housing projects. It's not that this is different. They're just adding geographical space. It's not that they're doing something that they never did, that they're only supposed to do in RDA project areas. So I cannot see how adding just more geographic area will disappoint 9-line area people. I don't know. I cannot see it. I don't know.
I see what you mean. I also want to, maybe someone can clarify this, but we've been talking about the 9-line being as a pilot program before we started talking about the changes on the ordinances regarding ADU. So this was a conversation we've been having for a little while ahead of the conversation of the ordinance changes that we made, that we all participated on. I don't see why the 9-line alone will not give us a good sample size so we can learn from it, also learn from, I don't understand why probably one of the areas that is seeing no ADUs naturally occurring will not give us a good sample size to learn more about this project. But that is, that is a caution I want to.
Do houses in the 9-line typically have lots the size of which would accommodate ADUs? As I'm recalling, it feels like those are some smaller lots there.
We do have a slide that with some geographic area of 9-line. We could go back to that if you're interested, but I think the average lot size was 8,000 square feet, which
they're actually
can fit one.
pretty large lots.
I agree with piloting. I like doing things in an informed manner, but I'd like the pilot to be time restricted, because my Jordan Meadows and West Point people have lots absolutely ready for this, and I think there would be a desire, and I would like to see it expanded as quickly as possible.
I agree.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think your comments about our original intention with piloting in 9-line are spot on. I think, as we've indicated, that was a function of our agreement with the county. So at least as far as the RDA started this conversation, 2+ years ago as a function of that. That's where we started. And we obviously, the reason we asked, we want board input on whether we stick to just 9-line pilot or whether we go citywide. But I think one thing to keep in mind too is when we first presented that and first discussed it as a pilot program, we were only talking about having $400,000 and going and really just gathering information. I think you, within your role as a city council and approving the zoning change, you're going to possibly see now a lot more interest in doing this. And I think to that extent, we may want to stay on top of that and not necessarily stick to just the pilot program, but at least be able to come back to you as staff and provide you with information as to what extent the rest of the city we may play a role and what our financing participation could be and what terms you may want as a council to kind of be able to help encourage that development happening the way or where we want it to. So I think we don't necessarily have to make that decision right now. I think you as a board can make that decision with where you allocate your funds. And when we come back with this information after the RFP and have a deeper discussion of what we found out and what you may want to make as far as policy discussions, I think that's probably an appropriate point in time to say, do we want to limit this or put more funding into it on the 9-line to honor what we've said as far as that's our focus, or to what extent should our role be citywide and what we want to do to help anything that happens on that end. So I know we'd like to know right now whether you want to just stick to 9-line or citywide, but I think we could also kind of provide information to help you make that decision after this RFQ.
Mr. Chair, I think for me it's going to depend on what I'm going to call it a menu of tools ends up looking like, because some of them may be more appropriate for a specific geographic area and others may be appropriate citywide, and some may be applicable for tax increment funding from the 9-line area and others may not. So I think to me it kind of depends on what we get, I guess. If this is the process we're going to go through to figure out what is available in the program, then I need to see that before I would know whether it's applicable to the whole city or not, I suppose.
I think that makes sense to me as well. Obviously, I share my concern about telling the community that this was going to stay there, and then all of a sudden changing halfway through before we started. But I think that makes a lot of sense to come up with a little more details and learn a little more about the program, and then bringing it up to this board and have that discussion. And because remember, Petro mentioned an actual deadline to the pilot program. I think that would be important. I think you guys mentioned to start this hopefully in the winter of 2024. And you also said a year of a pilot program. So allegedly winter of 2025, it will be the end of that. Okay. Councilmember Petro.
Are we looking at other ways to mitigate cost? I know at one point we had said we would investigate if it was possible, instead of going all the way out to the main sewer line, if we could hook into the house sewer line. And I know that was represented as one of the major costs in this. Are we looking at those other things that will control cost as well?
Yeah, and that's why we do work with the other departments on this. As far as we've learned, an ADU does have the ability to tap directly into the home's utilities to save costs that way. But there are cases when public utilities won't allow it because the home's utility, maybe the sewer line is bad, the water line's bad, so they have to just build a new one anyways.
Okay, I think we're a little past the time. This is a pressing question. Okay, thank you for the update. I really appreciate everybody on the discussion. We're moving on to item number 3, Redevelopment Agency budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. Follow-up at the table will be Jennifer Bruno, the Deputy Director, to give us a brief introduction or a long introduction. I don't know.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this discussion is just to summarize sort of where the council landed on housing items as they relate to RDA budget. In the staff report, you'll see that the 4 items that are covered from the RDA budget are the notice of funding availability. These are things that are changing in the RDA budget. Notice of funding availability for housing development, a partnership with the NeighborWorks for equity sharing workforce housing, citywide ADU incentives, and a partnership with Salt Lake County for adding housing to their Sunday Anderson Senior Center redevelopment project. You'll notice that there are a couple of other housing items that the council straw polled supporting that are not funded by RDA. Those appear in the general fund. Sanctioned camping, the funding for sanctioned camping and the funding for switch point gap financing are in the non-departmental section of the general fund. And then funding for the loan program for naturally occurring affordable housing appears in the housing fund, which is a separate accounting space from the general fund. It will be adopted in conjunction with the city budget tonight. So we provided the key changes document that you guys have in front of you. The changes to the RDA budget that was proposed by the mayor are highlighted in yellow. That this just reflects the summary that I just gave. And so I don't know if you had any questions on any of those. Excuse me. You'll be considering adopting the RDA budget in conjunction with your 7 o'clock meeting later tonight as the RDA board.
It seems like it's going to be a brief discussion. Come up with a question. Vice Chair, I assign you to come up with a question. I think that, I don't know, is anybody else? Are we good?
I see.
Councilmember Wharton seems to be grabbing the microphone. Board member.
You restate what you just said?
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe I'll say it in a different way. Maybe that'll help. So the items that were changed in the RDA budget that you'll see highlighted in yellow are funding for the notice of funding availability, funding for the partnership with NeighborWorks for equity sharing workforce housing, funding for the citywide ADU incentives, and funding for the partnership with Salt Lake County for adding housing to the Sunday Anderson Senior Center. Maybe I can walk through sort of where each of those appears. Let's see, starting on several pages down on the secondary housing fund. So if you turn several pages, half of the funding for the partnership with the Sunday Anderson Senior Center is funded from there. And the other half is funded from the primary housing fund, and that's just a function of where funds were available. Then if you keep scrolling down to the West Side Community Initiative.
And on those two, are we taking it from another project, or we're just taking it from the balance?
So both of those funds had line items for housing development funding. And so instead of having it be a generic housing development funding, it's for a specific project. The West Side Community Initiative, this was not taken from any proposed use. The West Side Community Initiative is contributing $700,000 towards the development of the partnership with NeighborWorks, the shared equity workforce housing development. Then if you scroll down to the Housing Development Fund, that's where most of the adjustments appear. So that's reflecting a transfer from the dormant HUD program funds into the RDA so that the RDA can use those in the NOFA. And it's reflecting that the funds that are being transferred from the general fund, from Funding Our Future, which are the $2.59 million and the $1.7 million from the North Temple Viaduct, are now going to be used for the remainder of the partnership with NeighborWorks Housing for Shared Equity and the citywide ADU incentives program.
So, the Funding Our Future transfer from North Temple Viaducts, and transfer from in-home dormant program income funds. That's going to which project?
Those are going to the projects that are listed there below. So. Okay. A combination of a notice of funding availability, ADU incentives, and the partnership with NeighborWorks.
Got
it. The partnership with NeighborWorks, was it always 1.4? I thought Or
It's,
how was it,
it's
$2
split
million
funding, so
before?
Councilmember Pui felt, and I think the council supported funding part of it from the West Side Community Initiative. So I think the total cost is 2.3 million.
Oh, okay.
And so 700,000 is coming from the West Side Community Initiative.
Okay.
And
Got
the
it.
hope was that to have a community, this to be probably the first community initiative project funded, right? Because we haven't had anything done with that money yet. And maybe
Purchasing property recently.
right, but a housing project, not yet, and hopefully Neighbor Works can bring this home for us.
Awesome.
And then what about the funding for the naturally occurring affordable housing request?
Loans.
Yeah.
That is funded through the housing fund class, which is a separate balance sheet essentially from the city's general fund or the RDA. And so that's where you'll see that. And you'll adopt those funds in conjunction with the general fund when you adopt the overall city budget later tonight.
Okay, and in the event that we, I know that the Sunday Anderson branch was dependent in part on some county decisions. If that doesn't pan out, then we just have a budget amendment to put that 3 million back into where it was suggested before or some other option.
Yeah, it's just over 2 million. And I think, yeah, it's accurate to say that the RDA staff would come back and propose adjustments.
Oh, okay, I thought it was a $3 million request.
I think originally there was 3, but
Okay.
there wasn't, confirmation on how much is needed. So 2 million is just over 2 million is what ended up in the budget.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
just because it's bright red here of a change from 2023's adopted budget, I would like to ask for an update at some point about the Japantown Street reconstruction and how, because I'm realizing next year it's not even going to show up on the list because there's not even going to be anything in the FY24 budget, so there's not even going to be anything to compare it to. And I don't want us to forget about that project. So what can we, where are those conversations? Do we need to have partnerships with other departments or other agencies? And what can we do to make sure that that doesn't get forgotten about next year when there's no longer a dollar amount to compare to?
We can follow up with the RDA staff to get an update on that.
Thank you.
I will appreciate that too, so thank you. Any further questions?
Okay, so with all of these, we're not necessarily taking away funds from another project. We're just tying up funds that would be an opportunity for other unspecified projects.
Yes, and actually, I think that because the RDA and CAN were able to work together, you've actually increased your funding for the notice of funding availability. So when the mayor recommended her budget, those funding our future dollars were recommended to be the main source of funding for the notice of funding availability, because CAN identified that they had some funds that were expiring that needed to be spent on housing development. That enabled the RDA to have an even greater notice of funding availability, which freed up those dollars to be spent on specific housing development projects. So same purpose as originally proposed in the budget, just specific projects.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
And I'm not sure if you've already mentioned this, but a lot of what facilitated a lot of this was the dormant funds that were identified within the CAN department. And so this was some really model cooperation between the two departments, RDA and CAN. They really came together to provide all kinds of ideas and options, and I think it resulted in more efficiency and more housing all the way around, which was really nice to see, and I think everybody was excited about it at the staff level.
In total, we've been adding up, just to summarize the city's budget, there's about $17 million going towards housing or housing-related activities in the RDA alone. So that's really exciting.
We keep leading state. So it's pretty good stuff.
Okay. Let's move on to item, thank you so much, Jennifer, I appreciate it. Report and announcement, item number 4, a report and announcement from the executive director. It seems like there is no announcement from the executive director. Let's move on to item number 5, report and announcement from the RDA staff. No report and announcement from the RDA staff. And number 6, report of the chair and vice chair. I would like to just add a little note to thank, I guess, everybody that works on the budget so hard to make these meetings happen. The amount of work that everybody puts to give us the information, and it's incredible. So thank you so much for. No one ever sees that on the street level, but the work that you put makes a big difference to make our lives easier. So thank you so much, and to run the city like we're doing it. So it is a big deal. There doesn't seem to be any written briefings. There is no consent items, and I believe there is no tentative closed session. So I will be adjourned. Thank you so much.
Should come back at 2:15 for council work session.